when you put pressure on the blade, it can push that lock right off, push the spring right off, because the angle is too great. It'll wedge it off. So you don't want that to happen. When the downward pressure is placed on the blade, you want that blade, the lock face, to hold that spring without moving it and without jamming it. And the ideal zone, what we call the Goldilocks zone, is about 8 to 10 degrees, maybe 7.5. I don't like it that shallow. Up to about 11. I don't like it that steep. I generally use 9 to 10 degrees, and I think most knife makers use between 8 and 10. And as I said, either one of them is okay. So we've looked at the edge finder, we've looked at the wheel, and how do we hold the blade in the milling machine? Do that on a fixture. There are different kinds of fixtures, and there's some that can be bought on the market. I saw one recently for about $385. This one is homemade. Whole thing cost about 45 bucks. I used a cast iron angle plate right here, and the plate of steel at the bottom, which is fairly accurate. Actually, a little story you might be interested in. I know this is accurate. It's a nice square, straight plate on the bottom there, because it came out of Los Alamos National Laboratories. They had sales of parts from when they put together atom bombs and all sorts of machines and tools, and they sold them. And this came out of Los Alamos, and you probably can't see it, but stamped right along the bottom there is a serial number. I've never looked up the serial number. I'm not even sure if it's available, but there it is. Anyway, have a nice square, accurate bottom plate, an angle plate. This is a screw, which is the pivot and a locking screw. The blade is held in with a clamp. Against the pivot. Now the pivot I use a pivot with 3 steps because I've used 3 different pivot diameters. 1/8 inch, 3/16, and 7/32. And by moving this pin, which forms the pivot, in and out, I can lock onto here a blade of any of the designs that I use. The smallest, the medium, or the largest. This happens to be the largest, which is 7/32 on my ATCF. Have a locking clamp and an adjustment clamp up at the top. And this, by turning the wheel, raises or lowers. And see if I can do this upside down, which I don't normally do. There we go. Okay, so that pivots around there. By adjusting the vertical clamp, I can bring the blade up, bring the blade down, in order to get a nice 90-degree angle on my lock face, which is right here. This is the lock face that we're going to create. I'll lock that in. And I'm going to set up on the milling machine and give a demonstration of how we actually do the measurement and do the cut.